It's 3 p.m. here in Nigeria and 4 p.m. in the United Kingdom, where Prime Minister Boris Johnson is battling to stay in office amid a growing wave of resignations from his government in protest at his leadership. New Chancellor Nadhim Zahawi is urging unity after his predecessor, the Health Secretary, and several junior ministers walked out. But the Prime Minister has been hit by 6 further resignations, taking a total to 16 in the past day. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer reacts to the resignations, describing it as a government that is now collapsing. Let's give you more details in this report.
The resignations came minutes after the Prime Minister apologised for appointing MP Chris Pincher to a government role. Education Secretary Nadhim Zahawi has now been named as the new Chancellor, and Downing Street Chief of Staff Steve Barclay will replace Mr. Javid as Health Secretary. Higher Education Minister Michelle Donland has been promoted to Education Secretary. Mr. Johnson admitted he had made what he called a bad mistake in appointing Mr. Pincher to the role of Deputy Chief Whip earlier this year, despite being made aware of earlier allegations about the MP's conduct.
In hindsight, it was the wrong thing to do. I apologise to everybody who's been badly affected by it.
Alongside Mr. Sunak and Mr. Javid, Bima Folami quit as Tory Vice Chair live on TV. Andrew Morrison resigned as a trade envoy, and ministerial aides Jonathan Gullis and Saki Bati left their roles. But according to the BBC, Foreign Secretary Liz Truss, Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove, and other cabinet ministers are backing the Prime Minister as he assesses the scale of the rebellion against his leadership. The resignation of 2 senior cabinet ministers has plunged Mr. Johnson into a fresh leadership crisis, weeks after he survived a no-confidence vote. The PM is immune from a Conservative leadership challenge until June next year under party rules, after he won 59% of the vote. In response to the resignations, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says he would welcome a snap election and that the country needed a change of government.
Changing one man at the top of the Tory party won't make any difference. It won't fix the problems. Let's have a fresh start for Britain. Let's have a real change of government.
The next general election is expected to be held in the year 2024, but could be earlier if Mr. Johnson used his powers to call one. The leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey, says the Prime Minister's, quote, government of chaos has failed the country, end quote, and called for him to go.
Well, let's discuss this now. We have joining us via Skype from the United Kingdom, international affairs analyst Benga Onifade. It's good to have you join us at this time. Pretty sad that we have to discuss the seat of the Prime Minister Boris Johnson yet again after a series of questionings and controversies, So now that we have to discuss him again, British newspapers showed a different perspective today, across political spectrum, displaying a ratio of near uniformity, casting doubt on the political future of Prime Minister Boris Johnson. I want to ask, is this media frenzy or is the Prime Minister in serious trouble?
Well, I think there's a real problem here. Good afternoon. Right from when he became the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson's premiership has been characterized by a string of scandals since entered number 10 in 2019. From the Pestminster Gates to water paper gate. The Prime Minister has been seeking to ride out every storm, during this 2.5-year tenure. From David Cummings, who instigated implored the COVID rules, breaking his own rule, to Charlie Upspeak, to Rob Robertson, everything, and now everything is, it's like a house of cards. It's all falling on itself right now and collapsing. Personally, I don't think he's really got much time, even though he did say it's going to take a flamethrower to get him out of number 10. It's quite unfortunate. Well, here we are.
Pretty unfortunate that we have to discuss him and kind of like a behavioral stuff now, not necessarily some kind of policies, although there have been discussions about some policies he had made some weeks back. Now we have to discuss character and the fact that he is not seeming to hold the government together, having this number of ministers resign, showing that they are no more backing him. These are ministers that used to be his key allies, you know, in his government. But if you will take a look at what we've seen already, we see the rank and file Conservative MPs planning to discuss whether to allow a fresh confidence vote. This is close to a month now after they had the first one. Can they really unseat him if they go ahead with this confidence vote?
Well, there are different ways you can unseat the UK Prime Minister. So yes, you're right. Another one is if we get another no confidence vote, which would have to be forwarded by, we have the 1922 committee. If they actually do push out for one, then you could get that one. If you get further resignation, prime ministers actually say there's more than enough people to replace these guys. And then, of course, if there's a snap election, which they have to go to Her Majesty the Queen for us, if they go to Her Majesty the Queen, if she allows a snap election, which is going to have to be brought forward to be called on, and if he's able to survive any of this at all, of course, you can only have one of them at any one time. If the Prime Minister is able to survive any of them, then of course that just puts away all this speculation, for the time being, again, for another God knows how many more years that he's got or that he wants to be in charge for. But can he be unseated? Yes, it can be. But like I said again, it just has to go through any of these means. So today alone, for example, we've had 6 more resignations. So between tea time and today, we've had 22 resignations in less than 24 hours. That's not very good for any leader. It's very untenable, unfortunately, for the Prime Minister. But if we have any of these opportunities for him to be unseated, if any of them is proceeded, and if he happens to lose out, then of course the seat is no longer his.
Some persons would have, said that having the former Prime Minister Theresa May, we don't seem to have so much drama around the Prime Minister's seat as we have with Boris Johnson. But if you would compare the two Prime Ministers, considering the character, behavior, the policies, what is different when you look at those two Prime Ministers and how well they've been able to handle the MPs?
So it's a really good question you asked me there. Boris Johnson has always been more of a character, really. He's more of someone who draws attention to himself. He's happy to make fun of himself, and which kind of diverts the policies away. But we are in a very difficult situation right now. We need a strong leader. Could it be the one? I'm not sure. Yes or no. I'll leave that to the voters. But we had Theresa May. Theresa May was actually a strong woman, but unfortunately, I think she wasn't actually very certain. They have that similarities in certain, in people as a people when it comes to situations. Because Boris Johnson initially he was against Brexit and then eventually supported Brexit. Likewise, Theresa May. Theresa May was a proponent for Brexit, so that got her unseated. But at the same time, I would have thought Theresa May was actually a bit more focused, and she didn't really have a character issue or in terms of drawing attention to herself in that sense. So, of course, she was able to focus on the job. But again, we had somebody, if you're going to get over Brexit, we don't need someone who's supporting Brexit to be able to get us over it. And unfortunately, that gave Boris Johnson the opportunity. So in that instance, if you think about the character, there's nothing wrong with their character in my view, but unfortunately, one of them is more of a character drawn towards them, while the other person, in Theresa May in this case, she's more of a policy person, and I think and of course, being a very strong woman, so she's more policy oriented. While if you're going to judge Boris at all, is more character oriented, it's a bit more personal. And if you think about it, for example, until he became Prime Minister, every time they tend to discuss private issues, but in his instance, for example, they were told that anything that's got the personal related issues, just take that away and let's just focus on the job at hand. But unfortunately, we're here now again, and it's all come back to this character, personality traits again.
But okay, so while we are concerned and we're looking at the proceedings in the House, let's take you to the streets now. What are the people saying do they feel that the Prime Minister should leave with a modicum of decorum, or is this just politics playing out?
And I didn't take a questionnaire to people, but a few people I've spoken to and a few places I've been reading, majority of the polls online are thinking it's more of a politics that's playing rather than none. Because if you look at the timing of the resignation, it's, you know, people are resigning within minutes of each other. That's number one. Number two, also, one of the things we are struggling with is, do we have the right person to lead us through this point, this problem? This is, you know, record inflationary measures right now. People are really squeezed out, and they think, who do we have? If we decide to go today, who is the right person? Okay, Sir Keir Starmer, who is the Labour leader, people think, okay, he does a lot of talking, but he hasn't really put fiscal policies as to how he will, implement a few of these things he's discussed. So we don't actually have the right person as far as the people are concerned, even though majority of people think Boris Johnson is still the right man for the job. But unfortunately, his character, he's not actually leading by example, and this character flaws is undoing him. If you think about Houdini, the escapist, the big magician, he had, and just like Boris Johnson before him, he had so much powers, but ultimately, it just didn't really end well for him, regardless. And a lot of people are thinking this is where he's going to go, but unfortunately, we still don't have the right key person for to lead. Even though some of the people think, okay, these guys who are lefty, because if you think about it, just a few weeks ago, the same people who are resigning, they had they supported him in the no confidence vote,
Yeah,
saying,
they were key allies. They had his back at all times.
Yes, they thought he was still the right person, but now they thought, okay, we're going to call it back. Things still haven't changed. And unfortunately, Johnson didn't do the right thing for himself. Within that short time, there was still another scandal, still able to sneak in. So you could say he's unseating himself if he eventually has to go, but we don't have the right person as far as I'm concerned right now. Majority of people are thinking, who is going to do it? We don't know who is going to replace him, unfortunately.
Well, the Prime Minister has weathered several storms before. Hopefully, he's able to wriggle himself out of this one. International Affairs analyst, Gbenga Onifade, thank you so much for discussing this with us on The World Now.
Thanks for having me.